Okay, welcome here to Aguas Calientes for Denis Coulet's hour record attempt. We're getting started a little later than expected. For those of you who have been watching, you may have seen that he made one attempt at starting, and I'm not sure exactly what happened, but it me, because I haven't talked to him, that his rear wheel wasn't tightened enough, and with the force of his start, his chain pulled his rear wheel over, and so it began to touch his frame, and it was rubbing. So hopefully that is something that didn't do much damage to the tire or the frame. Tire I would worry about a little more. And they'll just be able to get it tightened down there and ready to go in a second. They're doing that across the velodrome, as you can see. I was just looking out at them, and it seems like that's what they're doing. So hopefully we'll see him getting started too. It's getting started soon. If you've been watching for a little while, you will have seen him doing some warm up. You will have seen the start gate getting put out, him getting put in the start gate, and then making that start. So I don't think he'll go circle the track much again, but maybe a little bit to make sure the bike's working, and then we'll get him back in the start gate and he'll get going. After that, I need to get the timing started for him to help him time his own effort. And after that's done, I will come up there and give you a little more commentary on his record attempt. So for now, I will leave you and to watch what's happening now that you know a little bit about what's going on. Again, this is Denis Coulet. He's from Canada. He's making a men's 35 to 39 hour record attempt. The current record is 51 kilometers, 599 meters. It was set by Geert Fouche, who is from South Africa, and he set it here in Aguas Calientes. It's a challenging record. Denis also will have an opportunity to set a Canadian national record for his age group. That record currently he should hold because he broke it, but there were some technical issues, and so it hasn't yet been confirmed. And so he'll be attempting to break both his own record there, which was in Canada on a track that's not as fast as this track, in around 46 kilometers. He will also be trying to break the record that's on the record books there, which is substantially less than that. I'll tell you a little bit more about the details of that. That's what his task is that he has ahead of him. I hope you eventually will get to enjoy watching this once he gets the bike all ready to go. Okay, welcome back to Denis Coulet's hour record attempt. You might have heard me talking a little bit earlier. Before he started, he had a start where he had a mechanical malfunction. But I'll reintroduce myself here in case you didn't. I'm Rob Van Howling, and I'm one of the people who helped organize these hour attempts you've seen these last, the couple of them yesterday. There'll be a couple of them today and a couple tomorrow. And there are some shorter attempts at shorter records. For example, this afternoon, we'll have a 2K record attempt by Bonnie Woodbury, an American woman in the 80 to 84 category. She set a new 200-meter record, I think breaking her own record yesterday, right near 14 seconds. And so it'll be interesting to see what she does for 2K. That'll happen about 4 o'clock this afternoon. Then at about 6:30 or 7 o'clock this evening, Aguas Calientes time, and that's same as Mountain Time right now in the United States. It will be the attempt by Molly Van Howling, who you may have figured out is my wife, who will be attempting to break her age group hour record. The UCI calls them Masters Best Performances, but for shorthand we'll call them records in the 50 to 54 category. But back to Denis here. So Denis is a Canadian athlete in the 35 to 39 category. And I'd say he has two goals here. One goal is the UCI Masters Best Performance for his age category. That's quite a challenge. That record was set here in Aguas Calientes by the South African Geert Fouch a few years ago. I was here for that attempt, and Geert set a very fast record. I think you can see it on your screen there. But just to refresh our memories, I think that was 51,599. So that's 51 kilometers, 599 meters covered in an hour. That is a difficult record to beat, but that's what Denis has set as one of his goals. Another goal is to do the best he can and establish a Canadian record in his age category. Currently, you can see the Canadian record on the screen in his age category. That record is the record that you'll see if you look in the Canadian record books. Denis himself set a distance in a previous hour attempt in Canada that exceeded that, but for some weird technical reasons that has yet to be homologated. So Denis's record that he set himself in Canada was a little under 46 kilometers, and that record that you are seeing on the screen, as you can see, was a little over 43 or close to 44 kilometers. So there's quite a spread. So Denis in some ways is ensured of success at his goal here, and he's just trying to do the best he can. He'll get a Canadian hour record probably if he finishes his hour here, and he'll see how close he can come to the UCI record, if not exceed it. Little bit about what you're seeing on the screen there. So you should be seeing his lap times every lap, the number of laps he's done, the amount of time that's passed, counting up towards the hour, and also what his average speed is to this point. And finally, where he is relative to that world best performance or world record for his age group set by Geert Fouch here in Aguas Calientes in the past. Right now, he's riding behind that pace, but I'm not certain what pacing strategy Denis has in mind. He may be trying to settle in and see if he can ride negative splits here that would eventually bring him up to that pace. Okay, so he's at this point, I think, right, a little more than 10 minutes into his effort. And getting towards the quarter-way point here. So this part of the effort up to this point should have felt not horrible to Denis. If it's felt horrible to him to this point, then it's unlikely it's a pace he can sustain for the full hour. And it should feel sort of free to this point in the effort. And so it will be interesting to see how he proceeds from this point. So I'll leave you to watch him a little bit. Yeah, you can watch the time, the laps, the lap times, and then I'll come back in a little bit, give you a little more information or background about the velodrome here, why Denis is doing his attempt here, why Geert did his attempt here and so many other athletes have, and talk a little bit more about the hour record and the various things that go into trying to set one, which is a lot of various components that Denis and the group here is trying to put together for him to do the best that he can. Okay, I will be back in a bit. Enjoy watching Denis make rounds of this beautiful track here in Aguascalientes, Mexico. The one thing I would say before I leave is if you get a chance and you're enjoying watching this record, and especially if you want to watch and know when more of them are coming up here in Aguascalientes, including the ones that we have planned that I talked about a little bit. And we have, again, a couple more planned tomorrow. Andrea Smith from the United States in the morning will be trying to break the women's 55 to 59 record. She holds the current American record. She'll be trying to supersede that. I think at the least she's going to give it her best. And then in the evening tomorrow on the hour side, we have Norman Alvis. He's going to be trying to set a record as well. And in the afternoon, we'll have another attempt by Bonnie Woodbury, probably for 500 meters, and an attempt by Molly, depending on how things go this evening for her. If she's feeling fresh enough, she'll try to break a 2K record tomorrow for her age group. But if you want to watch those things, back to my point, please like the channel that you're watching. So JC Sports, either on YouTube or on Facebook. Please like it, follow it, and that will give you access to these record attempts and probably other ones that happen here in Aguascalientes. It's great help to have them giving us this video production that's going to show you how so that you can see these attempts here in Aguascalientes. Okay, talk to you again in a bit. Here we are, past 20 minutes. It one. I think it's a little bit of a myth, but one take on the hour record is before you do it, you at least need to try 20 minutes at the pace you plan on doing it. And if you can do those 20 minutes, you can do the hour. I think it's a little bit of a myth. Those 20 minutes, as I said, are a little bit free, at least the first part of them. But often you'll see an athlete start having difficulty around this point. With Denis, it seems a little bit the opposite. He, from what I was seeing on screen, he was running laps around 18.6, occasional 18.7 in there. In the last few minutes, he's been running a little quicker than that. So he really seems to have settled in. I think he started a little hard, and now he's really moving along efficiently here. Denis, a little more about this velodrome and about Denis. So we're in Aguascalientes, Mexico. The altitude in Aguascalientes and at this velodrome is about 6,200 feet. The velodrome is a beautiful facility, as you can see, and it's a very fast velodrome, probably the fastest in the world right now. I'd hate to see what would happen to all those Olympic records that were just set in Paris if they held a competition like that here with the modern technology that we have in track cycling, the modern aerodynamic technology and bike technology, etc. But the advantage of being at altitude is when you're at altitude, the air is thinner. And the main resistance that a cyclist faces when they're pushing through the air is the air, not their tires running on the track, not their drivetrain. It's the air that they're pushing out of the way. And so when you get to altitude, you start saving power. You don't have to put out as much power to go as fast. So that's the upside of altitude. But the downside is that, especially for an athlete like Denis, who's coming from sea level in Canada or close to sea level, but even for athletes who live at altitude and are acclimatized, you don't have as much power to give or as much power to push back against the force of the air. And so your power drops a little bit, but for efforts, even efforts as long as an hour, the benefits of the lower air density and having to push less air out of the way overcome the costs of not having as much air to fuel your or oxygen to fuel your cardiovascular system. So that's one of the reasons that so many records are set here in Aguascalientes, because it is a velodrome at altitude. There's some velodromes very close to sea level. I don't know exactly what the altitude of that velodrome is in Paris, that are also very fast, but especially when they have competitions in those velodromes, they turn on the ventilation system, which blows in the right direction. They get the heat going. There's also, of course, another fast velodrome where some records have been set in Switzerland. That velodrome in Grenchen is at some altitude, so it's not a sea level velodrome, even though you'll see people who set records there call them sea level records. They would also acknowledge that the conditions there are always a little better than they are at sea level because it's at some altitude. But it's not, and some people think that's a great compromise. That velodrome's a great compromise because it's at altitude, so you get some of the benefits, but not at enough altitude that there's a real obvious physiological cost in terms of the amount of power you have to push against the air. Anyway, this velodrome, in addition to being at altitude, has some other advantages. And one of those advantages is without any heating or cooling here, it gets hot every day. Except for some cold, cloudy days in the winter, you can count on it getting above 80 degrees Celsius, 80 degrees Fahrenheit, 27 degrees Celsius in this velodrome every day. And you don't want to do an hour attempt in temperatures much higher than that. So what you need to do is your time here in this velodrome. Denis, as you saw, had a mechanical at his sort of set time he was planning to go, and so he started a little later. So it's probably a little bit hotter in here than he anticipated. I'll go on the temperature here in a second for you and give you a little bit of information about that. It'll continue to get hotter throughout the day here, and it'll get really too hot to do an hour attempt at some point during the afternoon here, up to around 90 degrees. And at that point, it really has become too hot to reliably put out enough power to do an hour attempt. The advantage of the heat is, like the altitude, the heat reduces the air density, and that helps you go faster. The cost is, as you've probably also figured out, physiological. When it gets hot, especially in a long effort like an hour, eventually your body can't keep up in cooling itself, and your heart rate goes up, and you can't put out as much power. So looking at things here, the temperature now is almost 87 degrees Fahrenheit where I'm standing. I'm a little bit above the track here, so it's hotter up here in the top of the velodrome than it is down where Denis is riding a little bit. The air density is 0.930 for those keeping track of that at this point up here at this level of the velodrome. You know, when someone attempts to set an hour record here, they need to concentrate on getting themselves ready to compete at altitude and getting themselves ready to deal with at least some heat so they can ride in the optimal temperature when the air density is a little bit less. One of the hour records that's been set here was set by Vittoria Bussi. She set a couple here, actually. And a couple of women's hour records recently going over 50 kilometers. Vittoria, I know from talking to her, has taken the heat and the altitude acclimatization very seriously when she's been here, and that's been one of the secrets. There are many. She puts a lot of effort into those attempts, but one of the secrets to her success. And Denis, likewise, has been trying to address those issues. So I know from talking to him that he's, and seeing him here, that he's been here for a few weeks now. Looks like he's halfway through his effort here, that he's been here for a few weeks now, acclimatizing to the heat. And altitude. And before that, to get ready for the heat, he was already taking saunas and doing other things that helped his body get used to the heat. So Denis has taken that seriously and brought that to this effort here. So hopefully he's not finding the heat too much to deal with in this hour. It is getting probably a little hotter than he intended. Just to finish up a little bit on the velodrome before we go look at and talk progress here. A couple other records that were set here. One was the initial hour record under the new rules for women set by Molly Van Houweling in 2015, right around the time that Jens Voigt set the initial new hour record for men. And also recently, Jeffrey Hoogland, who you saw competing successfully in the Olympics, set the 1 kilometer record here on a relatively cold day. He could have had better conditions and gone faster, but his calendar didn't allow for him to be here at the optimal time of year. Another record that you might know that was set here was Victor Kampenert's hour record when he exceeded the record of Brad Wiggins. So those are sort of some records that have been set here in this very quick velodrome, including a bevy of records or best performances for masters, national records, and world records held by, kept by the UCI. I took a quick break there to look Dennis's ride a little bit and see how his lap times are going and so forth. And really does seem like after that initial start, he settled in. Maybe going a little bit slower now. I saw some 18 sixes and 18 sevens there, but also saw still a run of 18 fives there. So really, that's great that he settled in. He's past halfway. It's not that it's easy past halfway, but once you get here, especially if you're still maintaining things, in my experience, usually you can, stay near there, not fall off dramatically. And let's hope that's the position Denis finds himself in. I'd say the one wild card here, as I said, is it is getting hotter and hotter. And so by the time Denis finishes, I wouldn't be surprised if it's above 90 degrees in here. That's making the air a little easier to push out of the way, but undoubtedly it's taking a physiological toll on him despite the efforts that he's made to prepare for these conditions. And so it's a difficult balancing act, and everyone has to figure out, where their body fits ideally in the in that balancing act. Are they a person who can really stand the temperature and avoid any loss in power and take advantage of the lower air density, or are they a person who needs to go in somewhat cooler conditions? We'll find out where Denis ends up here. Another little thing about the altitude, just, I think one thing people like to do is think about how you quantify how much you can gain at altitude here relative to your sea level effort. Of course, that depends to some extent on how fast your sea level effort was, but you'll hear numbers thrown around like, oh, you could gain 2 kilometers at altitude here in Aguas Calientes. And Denis seems to be heading towards a number like that. I think he's made a number of other improvements since his sea level hour record attempt that could add to the effects of altitude, but let's hope he exceeds that number and really sets a Canadian age group record to be proud of here. But I'd say that that's atypical. That a lot of athletes come here thinking that there are 2 kilometers there for the taking. It's not like that. Not relative to fast sea level velodromes, to records rode on in good conditions, and certainly not relative to a velodrome at some altitude that has a great surface like the one in Grinchen. So though I think that for an hour record, this probably is the fastest track that there is, the gains that you would typically see are not on the order that some people would anticipate when they plug things into an online calculator or even read some of the literature on what you should expect at altitude. I think typically the issue is not that you face more air density here than you expect. It's just that physiologically it's harder on a track to maintain the power at this higher altitude than people anticipate. So that's one comment to make. But Denis really seems to be doing a great job of taking full advantage of the conditions in the track here to improve his own Canadian record. Okay, so one other thing to talk about here is the city of Aguas Calientes, which is host to this beautiful velodrome. The velodrome itself is a cool thing about the city, not just because you can come here and set fast records, but as much because it really is a part of an investment that this city has made in youth sports. One of the people, you might have seen him come up to the trackside to tell Denis when he had gone a half hour and 45 minutes that the person that runs this velodrome and is the head coach for people at the velodrome is Israel Mata. And he leads a team of 3 coaches that coach athletes on the track and the velodrome. Right outside the velodrome, there's a BMX track. He doesn't coach those athletes. They have another coach from the state or the city that coaches those athletes. And then they also have a mountain bike coach, and they coach mountain bike athletes in the city. And this is just, the cycling program is great, but it's one of many programs that demonstrate the investment that this city makes in youth sport. And it's really incredible to see the number of kids here. Right now they're on break, so we haven't seen them at the velodrome the last few days. But when they're here and actively training, it's just, there's this track, there's an outdoor track that they also use. That track's not in great condition, but it's a great place to learn how to ride. Both of those facilities just get a lot of use here. And that's great. It's one of the cool things about this city. The city, I think it now is a little over 1 million people. I didn't really know about it before we started coming here to do our records a decade or so ago. So it's actually, I think a little bigger than the city of Detroit in the United States by comparison, which hasn't really gotten over 1 million people, I think, in recent years, although it has a lot of suburbs around it that bring up its numbers. But one thing about this city that it does also share with Detroit is that it has a lot of auto factories. Mostly here, Japanese auto factories, though there's a new, I think, Mercedes factory moving in and some others. The current party that controls the state of the party of the governor and they got elected in 2022 and will be the governor till 2027. It looks like to me they have a tagline for the state. It says, you might see it on the track here as Denis goes around the far corner, Aguas Calientes, Gente de Trabajo y Soluciones, and then El Gigante de Mexico. So you can probably make out what that means without me translating, but people of hard work and solutions, the giant of Mexico. When we first came here 10 years ago, the Aguas Calientes tagline was El Pequeño Gigante de Mexico, or the small giant of Mexico, and it is indeed a small state in the middle of Mexico, right in the middle of Mexico, but also a state, I said, that has real industrial capacity. It's also an interesting place to visit, so if you come here to do a record, I suggest you stay a few extra days. There are great restaurants, of course, as you would find in any city in Mexico, though be careful about the water and don't eat any salads. But there are great restaurants here, but also really cool museums in Aguas Calientes. There's the National Museum of Death. As you all might know, death is a major feature of Mexican art. And it's been that for a long time. Life has been hard in these parts, as in all parts, and one of the ways that Mexico has dealt with that and people living in Mexico have dealt with that is through art, and the Museum of Death gives you a great introduction and tour of that through that. There's also a museum devoted to the Mexican artist Jorge Posada. That museum is spectacular. It's a small museum here in Aguas Calientes. It has the art of Posada. Posada is probably most famous for the Katrina, the Mexican woman, skeletal woman that you'll see when you see art of Mexico. If it's not art by Frida Kahlo or Diego Rivera, it's often art by Posada, and it's this skeletal creatures or skeletal woman. And that a lot of his art is like that. His main job was actually being an illustrator for newspapers in Mexico City. He's from Aguas Calientes. That's why they have a museum for him here. But as an illustrator, he of course chronicled the history of Mexico. So and what they have in the museum is a lot of the plates that they made to put in the printing press. So he would illustrate something on a plate. That plate would go in the printing press, and then it would, you could make many prints of it. And so they have those plates and the prints of those plates and little descriptions don't remember if they're in English or Spanish, that describe the thing being chronicled and a little bit about it. And small museum, very cool to see. Both you get a little bit of Mexican history, you get an introduction to this great Mexican artist, uh, all in one. And it's in a neat little square next to a church, a beautiful church that you can go into, uh, and also some great restaurants there. I again highly recommend you thinking about coming here. Uh, One final thing to say about coming here is that the people who run the velodrome, so Israel, the coach I already mentioned, Juan Carlos Esparza, who works for the State Institute of Sports, Eddie, the mechanic and person who helps maintain the velodrome, Juan Carlos, who's doing our video. Again, follow JC, his channels, JC Sports, on Facebook or YouTube. They're all great, extremely helpful, and help you put together an event here and make sure that everyone gets an opportunity to be as successful as they can be. So we've been welcomed by them, as have many athletes here over time. So these names are going to be familiar to any athletes who are watching this and have been to Aguas Calientes. We also have us putting together this event. You, of course, need an anti-doping person to do the anti-doping controls. That person this time has come in from Panama. We have a UCI International Commissar. There's not one that lives in Mexico. And today we have Rainer Newlin, who is an international commissar from Venezuela. Luckily, he was able to get out of Venezuela to come here to do this event, despite the political troubles there. And we have a team of Mexican officials led by Moises Martinez Garduño, who, along with Reiner, has extensive experience doing records and officiating other competitions in this velodrome. And so they also make sure everything works smoothly for people making record attempts here. I'm going to take a look at how things are going again. You guys have been able to see it on screen as I talk for Denis, and get back to you. Well, as you who have been watching know, I went back and looked at the timing here. I can't see it from where I'm giving the commentary, but this is really beginning to pick things up. The laps I saw him riding were 18.3s, so that's up above what he was doing in the early to middle parts of this effort. He must be really dealing well with the heat. This is the sort of ride you would see where he's getting a lot out of himself. You know, he went out hard, but came off it pretty quickly, and now he's just pushing these laps and really maintaining where he is in terms of his average speed. In fact, potentially improving it a little bit here. So that's a great effort. So that's nice to see. These last 15 minutes, you'll hear there's not a big group of people here in the velodrome. They're used to records being set here, so you don't draw particularly large crowds, but you'll hear some people cheering him on. And when you get past 15 minutes, you can start maybe to push a little harder, though. I know, for example, that My wife Molly before has regretted that. People started cheering her on at 15 minutes to go. She started pushing a little harder, and if you go over what you can do, it's really hard to come back. You start seesawing back and forth where you try to maintain the pace that you can. So you go a little faster, a little slower. That's not efficient. So you want to sort of push on the accelerator smoothly if you're going to speed up, and it seems like that's what Denis did. Although you guys have watched the lap times a little more closely than I have, so you can reach your judgments about that too. Um, One other thing about Denis is riding a new bike frame there. It's a Dolan designed by the people at Aero. You can see he has Aero Coach handlebar extensions on that bike, and it's a new frame that Dolan's producing. And again, approved by the UCI, designed by Aero Coach, and it seems to be working quite well for Denis at this point. I think Denis is wearing a kit from No Pins, and that's also part of the secret to his speed here today. Okay, I'll let you watch these last laps and come back near the end to give you a sense of the total time, and we'll see at the end if we can catch the total time total distance as soon as we can. Talk a little bit about how that's calculated as the time comes near, and maybe then after, if Denis is up for it, he can give us a quick interview. So stay tuned and watch the remainder of this hour record.